Welcome to Pod Talk. Today we are going to talk about the tragic destiny of Hypatia of Alexandria. So, first, who is Hypatia? Hypatia was a mathematician, astronomer, and philosopher who lived in a very turbulent era in Alexandria's history. She is the earliest female mathematician of whose life and work reasonably detailed knowledge exists. Hypatia was the daughter of Theon of Alexandria, himself a mathematician and astronomer, and the last attested member of the Alexandrian Museum. Theon is best remembered for the part he played in the preservation of Euclid's Elements, but he also wrote extensively, commenting on Ptolemy's Almagest and handy tables. Hypatia continued his program, which was essentially a determined effort to preserve the Greek mathematical and astronomical heritage in extremely difficult times. She is credited with commentaries on Apollonius of Perga's conics, geometry, and Diophantus of Alexandria's arithmetic, as well as an astronomical table, possibly a revised version of Book 3 of her father's commentary on the Almagest. These works, the only ones she is listed as having written, have been lost, although there have been attempts to reconstruct aspects of them. In producing her commentaries on Apollonius and Diophantus, she was pushing the program initiated by her father into more recent and more difficult areas. She was, in her time, the world's leading mathematician and astronomer, the only woman for whom such claim can be made. She was also a popular teacher and lecturer on philosophical topics of a less specialist nature, attracting many loyal students and large audiences. Her philosophy was Neoplatonist and was thus seen as pagan at a time of bitter religious conflict between Christians, both Orthodox and heretical, Jews and pagans. An early manifestation of the religious divide of the time was the raising of the Serapeum, the temple of the Greco-Egyptian god Serapis, by Theophilus, Alexandria's bishop, until his death in 412 CE. This event was perhaps the final end of the great library of Alexandria, since the Serapeum may have contained some of the library's books. Theophilus, however, was friendly with Synesius, an ardent admirer and pupil of Hypatia, so she was not herself affected by this development, but was permitted to pursue her intellectual endeavors unimpeded. With the deaths of Synesius and Theophilus, and the accession of Cyril to the bishopric of Alexandria, however, this climate of tolerance lapsed, and shortly afterward Hypatia became the victim of a particularly brutal murder at the hands of a gang of Christian zealots. It remains a matter of vigorous debate how much the guilt of this atrocity is Cyril's, but the affair made Hypatia a powerful feminist symbol and a figure of affirmation for intellectual endeavor in the face of ignorant prejudice. Her intellectual accomplishments alone were quite sufficient to merit the preservation and respect of her name. But sadly, the manner of her death added to it an even greater emphasis. According to Socrates Scholasticus, during the Christian season of Lent in March 415, a mob of Christians under the leadership of a lector named Peter raided Hypatia's carriage as she was traveling home. They dragged her into a building known as the Caesarion, a former pagan temple and center of the Roman imperial cult in Alexandria that had been converted into a Christian church. There, the mob stripped Hypatia naked and murdered her using ostraca, which can either be translated as roof tiles, oyster shells, or simply shards. Damascius adds that they also cut out her eyeballs. They tore her body into pieces and dragged her limbs through the town to a place called Cinarion, where they set them on fire. According to Watts, this was in line with the traditional manner in which Alexandrians carried the bodies of the vilest criminals outside the city limits to cremate them as a way of symbolically purifying the city. Although Socrates Scholasticus never explicitly identifies Hypatia's murderers, they are commonly assumed to have been members of the Parabolani. Christopher Haas disputes this identification, arguing that the murderers were more likely a crowd of Alexandrian laymen. Socrates' Scholasticus presents Hypatia's murder as entirely politically motivated and makes no mention of any role that Hypatia's paganism might have played in her death. Instead, he reasons that she fell a victim to the political jealousy which at that time prevailed. The Canadian mathematician Ari Belenki has argued that Hypatia may have been involved in a controversy over the date of the Christian holiday of Easter, 417, and that she was killed on the vernal equinox while making astronomical observations. Classical scholars Alan Cameron and Edward J. Watts both dismiss this hypothesis, noting that there is absolutely no evidence in any ancient text to support any part of the hypothesis. Hypatia's death sent shockwaves throughout the empire. For centuries, philosophers had been seen as effectively untouchable during the displays of public violence that sometimes occurred in Roman cities, and the murder of a female philosopher at the hand of a mob was seen as profoundly dangerous and destabilizing. Although no concrete evidence was ever discovered definitively linking Cyril to the murder of Hypatia, it was widely believed that he had ordered it. Even if Cyril had not directly ordered the murder, his smear campaign against Hypatia had inspired it. The Alexandrian Council was alarmed at Cyril's conduct and sent an embassy to Constantinople. The advisors of Theodosius, too, launched an investigation to determine Cyril's role in the murder. The investigation resulted in the emperors Honorius and Theodosius II issuing an edict in autumn of 416. Which attempted to remove the Parabolani from Cyril's power and instead placed them under the authority of Orestes. The edict restricted the Parabolani from attending any public spectacle whatever, or entering the meeting place of a municipal council or a courtroom. It also severely restricted their recruitment by limiting the total number of Parabolani to no more than 500. According to Damascus, Cyril allegedly only managed to escape even more serious punishment by bribing one of Theodosius's officials. Watts argues that Hypatia's murder was the turning point in Cyril's fight to gain political control of Alexandria. Hypatia had been the linchpin holding Orestes' opposition against Cyril together, and without her, the opposition quickly collapsed. 2 years later, Cyril overturned the law, placing the Parabolani under Orestes' control, and by the early 420s, Cyril had come to dominate the Alexandrian Council.